Well, basically, Matt, preserving our past and elevating our future. What we basically mean by that is, I thought that if we could preserve some of the artifacts from our past that is being destroyed literally every day and taken off to the dumps and thrown out, that we could preserve it. And by preserving it, we could educate the guys who come behind us so that they'd understand how far we've come. And so they'd have a little understanding of what the type of equipment they're working on and what the things that we used to take care of. And our vision, my vision, is to have this museum go on. I mean, I got this collection that I started. My help from my father, from Patrick Carr, from guys, hundreds of guys all across the country, and I literally have guys from Norway and from England who help support us, have given us things here to the museum. And my goal is to make this last a lot longer than I do, and to have this go on so that, like I said, to elevate our future literally means, I feel, is to show that these kids that follow behind us will have some sort of material things that they can actually touch and to see and to put in their hands. Because until you actually see the equipment that I've saved, and the car stations and haul stations and water hydros and hand operated elevators and everything else that we have, until you actually see those in person, you don't realize that they ever existed, and it's a shame, because I feel like our industry is one of the profound industries in the world that actually helped, not only build America, but build the rest of the world.
Hello, and welcome to the Elevator Careers Podcast, sponsored by the Allred Group. I am your host, Matt Allred. In this podcast, we talk to the people whose lives and careers are dedicated to the vertical transportation industry to inform and share lessons learned, building upon the foundation of those who have gone before to inspire the next generation of elevator careers. Today, our guest is Steve Comley, president of the Elevator Museum in Amesbury, Massachusetts. Steve grew up in the industry with his father working at Payne Elevator, and Steve joined the company when he was 18 years old and worked 43 years as a mechanic. Steve has a passion for all things elevator related and has collected many artifacts from the trade. In 2018, Steve started the Elevator Museum as a way to preserve our past and elevate our future. Steve, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Matt. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for being here with me today. I'm excited to get to talk to you a little bit more, and obviously I want to talk about where you're sitting. I believe you call it the Elevator Museum. Is that correct?
It is, yeah. It's the Elevator Museum we have here. It's one of the only ones in the world that I know of. It started off down in New York with Patrick Carr. I joined with him in 2011, and I went down there as one of the directors of the museum down there with him. And then in 2016, he actually closed up the museum, and we brought it up here.
Awesome. We'll talk more about that in just a second. I'm just curious, how did you get your start in the elevator industry?
Well, I've been around elevators my whole life. My father worked for Payne Elevator, and he started in actually 1950. He's been in the elevator trade his whole life.
Okay.
So when he was a service tech up in Lowell. And when I was like 10 years old, I used to go out on double calls with him at nighttime. And I still remember getting on the elevator in the old freight cars, and he'd be on top of the car, and he'd go run up, and I'd run up, and run back down, run up again. He'd be playing with switches and stuff on top of the elevator. And I remember as a kid, and I always thought it was pretty neat. And I'm like, Dad, when we get out of here? And he'd say, well, I'll keep it up, and I'll buy you an ice cream on the way home. So that's how I get paid into it. And then in 1974, he bought Embry and White, which was fantastic. I was 14 years old at the time, and when I went down to the shop there, it used to say on the side of it, elevators and millwrights. And I remember saying to my dad, I said, what is a millwright, And it was his shop that he purchased in 1974 was a millwright and an elevator shop from 1873.
Oh,
it was
wow.
one of the oldest in the country. And they had the old flat belt pulleys coming from the ceiling, and they were always flapping when we go in there. And first time I went in there, it was awe-inspiring to me. I was just a young guy, and I went in there, and they had all the flat belt pulleys coming from the ceiling. And I remember going over by the lathe. My father was, watch out for all those metal filings. You get cut off that.
Oh,
Don't go
yeah.
near the lathe and near the belts. And the guy's over there welding in the corner. Don't go there. You get blinded by the arc welding. And the guys over there pouring Babbitt. They're pulling guide shoes and making some, something over there with the Babbitt tanks. It's awful hot. And you get burnt. And don't go over there and don't go over here. Watch out for the grease and the oil. And so I loved the shop. It was fantastic. It was a dangerous place to work. You know what I
Oh,
mean? It really
sure.
was. Kenny Embry
Wait.
worked with my dad for years, and he had all the flat belt pulleys. And he used to talk about as a kid when he first started there with the other guys, and they didn't want to shut, all the belts ran off of like one motor.
Wow.
And so to change speeds of his lathe, he used to, they wanted to have him stick his arm up in the belts and switch up to the next speed.
That
And when he
sounds
was a young
scary.
kid, it was crazy. He's like, no, I'm not doing that, And Kenny was a good guy, and he worked with my dad for years. He said, no, I'm not going to do that. So he'd shut the machines all down. The old guys get mad. And the old timers say, they'd stick his arm up there and they bop the belt up. You just watch out for where the connection was on the leather belts so it didn't catch you and rip you up into the
Oh
ceiling,
my
So,
gosh.
yeah. So yeah, it was an interesting place to work, And then when I get out of high school, I started working down there with them.
Yeah. Did you ever think that you would go somewhere else or do something? I mean, did you always want to be in the elevator industry?
No, I didn't. I did it because of my dad, and I loved it, But when I went down there, we used to when I was just a kid, we used to go in the back of his machine shop, and we would take the big elevator drum machines that were back there, and we would smash them all up with a sledgehammer and put them in the back of a dump truck, back of a pickup truck, and we bring them down to the scrapyard on weekends.
Wow.
And that was my money. My dad would give me the money for that. And I remember just being, even as a kid, looking at these old drum machines. I was fascinated by them. And it's weird because I was one of the ones that, I'm trying to save them. Back then, I destroyed them. I mean, I
Right.
literally broke them up with sledgehammers. And I say to my dad, I go, geez, these things, nobody even sees these things. These are
Right.
incredible piece of equipment. I'd say, why don't we keep some? And I remember telling him, he said, Stevie, there's nothing, you can't do anything with them. The drum machines
Right.
are illegal. They're too heavy to move around. Nobody wants them. You see firefighters, museums in every town you go into because you can keep the old fire trucks around and you can clean them back up. But
Right.
nobody saves old drum machines. Nobody saves old elevator machines or parts or anything. A lot of guys collect things like I have over the years, car switches and hall stations and different things.
Right.
You bring them home, and that's how I actually wanted to get into it one time, is to have a museum one day because it had so many different things.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So how old were you when you actually started as a full-time employee with your dad, is where it sounds like you started?
18. I
Okay.
was 18 years old when I got out of high school.
Just
Yeah.
moved right in, started working at it all. Now, you were telling me some time ago about how you at that shop, and maybe because that you worked on older machines, right? That it wasn't just that you would work on things that other people wouldn't touch.
Well, the reason for that was in the 80s, Amesbury White was a non-union elevator company.
Mm-hmm.
And it always was. It was like one of the largest and one of the oldest non-union companies for the longest time, up till 1995. But in the 80s, when I worked with my dad, all the big shops, Otis and Thyssen, all the big companies they get rid of all the old elevators. They said, either you're going to modernize these elevators, the old flat belt stuff and the hatch doors and the shipper rope elevators and the real old dinosaurs. We're going to get rid of all you guys, and there's nobody going to be out there to take care of you. And that wasn't true. We were out there and we took care of all the old stuff, and when I look back, I had some friends that I got in the trade, and they would flip out. They'd be like, Stevie, your dad's company's horrible. We're working all the old junk, and he says, a bunch of gladiators out here working on the dinosaurs and making fun of it. We'd be adjusting flat belt pulleys and fixing hatch doors, and the real old stuff that I miss to this day. You know what I mean? Because
Sure.
those dependable, reliable old stuff. I mean, you could always get it going. I never had a problem with it. You go in an elevator now and you got a PC board going. You could wait 3 weeks for it to get it fixed. Back then you go in there with a hammer and a screwdriver and a couple tools and off to the races.
Yeah. Do
Didn't
you
take
think
much.
do you think that working on that older equipment helped fuel your interest in the museum that you have today?
Absolutely. Yeah, because I really miss all the old stuff, and I just feel like it disappeared, and it still disappears like crazy. I mean, there's stuff all over the place, that's hidden in the walls. I mean, I know a lot of places like in Manchester and Haverhill and Lawrence, up in here in Massachusetts, that are in New Hampshire where, there's old machines up on the roof that are still there
Oh, wow.
because it's expensive all over the place,
Sure.
all over the place. Yeah, because they don't have the time or the money to take out these old machines. So, an old warehouse building that had two or three freight elevators in the penthouses, and drum machines were up on the roof, and they call an elevator company like, well, why don't you leave that old dinosaur right there and decommission it? We'll add another hoistway here and put a hydraulic in and something new in, and the old stuff would stay right there in the building because nobody wanted to pay to get rid of it. So there's a lot of stuff out there still in the walls.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm sure. I'm sure. So, how long did you work with your dad's company, and where did your career go from there?
I worked my dad's company up until 2013. I worked at the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, and I was the local resident mechanic up there for 28 years. I just
Wow.
retired past November. So I was up there for 28 years at the base. But I worked in the trade for 43 years. But 10 years ago, they awarded, they took the contract and they gave it out to a big conglomerate company that said, you'll be in charge of the elevators, you'll be in charge of the boilers, you'll be in charge of doors and windows, rooftop gutters, and all this, really all kinds of different things.
Right.
And so I became a union elevator mechanic with that company, but I was the only union guy that worked for the
Okay.
company.
Right.
And it was a really unique situation. I didn't have a lot of elevators. I worked on an island off the coast of Maine, the Portsmouth Navy Yard. They had all the nuclear
Wow.
submarines up there. It was really a great place to work. I had the best, I had the best seat in the house. I had all the penthouses up on the roof looking out over the ocean when it wasn't too busy. And
Nice.
yeah,
So you,
so
so you had
I,
all
I,
the elevators there.
I had 50 elevators on the base. It's not a
Okay.
lot of elevators, but they
Right.
were all in very weird positions. Like I had dry dock freight elevators that would go right down 35 feet of my elevator shaft would get flooded with ocean water.
Wow.
It's really bizarre. I'd have to pull the limit switches and stuff up. They had it set up so that everything was like on SJ cords. I go down, I pull the limit switches up, the pit switches up, the interlocks, the hall stations, and pull them up the shaft. And then they flood the dock, and next thing you know, I'd have seaweed hanging off my doors, and it was different. It was a different type of setup.
Yeah, yeah, that is unique. So, how did you get involved? I mean, you mentioned Patrick Carr and kind of getting involved with his museum, but it sounds like you already had your own collection going on.
I certainly did. I actually tried to start a museum. I lived in Haverhill, Massachusetts, and I went down to the Historical Society, and I had I had a couple hundred old plots and stuff, but I always knew I could get the big things because they were all out there. I just didn't have a place to put them. But
Right.
I always knew they were in shafts and walls, and people were throwing them out all the time, so I didn't think that would be a hard thing to get. And I went to the Hysterical Society. I call it Hysterical Society because they were, they didn't care. They didn't help me. They were like, yeah, you open it, we'll come. Give me a bill, give me a building, help me. But
Right.
that part became very hard. So what I did is I tried to, I really looked into it for a little bit in 2009, and then I kind of let it go. But I had a whole bunch of car switches and things that some of them are on the back over here that I took out myself. And even like my wife I'd have it at home, and she's like, get that thing out of the house here. So a lot of old elevator things are not very, eye appealing. So, I didn't get to
Depends
keep
on
it.
whose eye, right? The eye of the
Yeah.
beholder.
I know some people make the old car switches, they make light switches out of them. Then they take the bronze gears and make glass tables and stuff. And, so I always wanted to try to do something more with it. I wanted to really make a museum. I knew there were none out there. I thought it'd be a great idea. So then I get a little frustrated. So I went online and I looked up Elevator Museum, and Patrick Carr started in 2011. And in New York, and I called the number that was on the phone. He answered the phone. He said his dad's been doing it his whole life, and I said my dad's been doing it his whole life, and I've been doing it my whole life, and he did his whole life. So we had a lot in common.
Sure.
And I said I'd really like to, be part of your museum. I'd love to help you out. I'd like to go, but I don't want to just give you all my stuff. I said I want to be part of it. And he
Sure.
said sure. So he said bring all your stuff down, and I'll come up and get some stuff from you. And I said he said, I'll make you one of the directors of the museum. And I was tickled pink. I loved it. And I went down there to see him one time, and I was a little taken back because he had a consultant business and he sold parts, and he had tons and tons of small parts, and things that he collected for his museum. But when I went into his place, I just was a little taken back because it really wasn't what I pictured as a museum. I picture like Smithsonian where like a beautiful display case and everything set up and tagged and labeled. And
Sure.
to me that was a museum. And when I saw his stuff and all it was, I'm like, Patrick, this looks like the back of my old man's shop. What I mean? He had a bunch of old parts, but they're sitting in boxes, this and that. He didn't really have display cases and stuff, but he had a lot of stuff, and he's a great guy, and he was a lot of help. And then 2016, I was a little discouraged because I went down there. I said, can I come down on a weekend? And me and my dad will run the museum, and we'll give people tours and walk them around. And he's like, well, I don't really open. We don't really do it like that. And he says, so I'm like, what do you mean you don't do it like that? When do you open? And so he said, I just, when people call up and they want to look at it, I open them up. I'm like, that's interesting. So 2016, he called me up and said, Steve, I'm closing the museum. He didn't have enough support for it. And I said, well, I want all my stuff back, please. And he said, Steve, you're the only guy that's ever helped me with anything. He goes, I'll give you a bunch of stuff. I'll give it all to you.
Wow.
I'm like, you're kidding me. And I'm like, all right. So I actually hooked up with Local 4 in Boston, and we brought everything up from Local 4, and we put it in their meeting room. Our meeting room holds, right now we have 1,300 members in our meeting, in our Local 4 in Boston. So we have a big, huge meeting room. And I lined the walls with all this stuff. I bought the really nice display cases, and I spent the time to buy little easels, and I got little plastic pieces to stand up everything. And I wanted everything in the cabinet so you could see it, and I wanted it cleaned, and I wanted it right, and it was really good.
You kind of turned the meeting hall into the museum, as it were, right?
I did, but there was a problem with it. And that was, I literally had Time Magazine call me up one day and said, Steve, can we come down? I'd love to, heard you got a museum, an elevator museum, and we'd like to take a look at it and take some pictures and meet with you. And I said, sure. And he said, where is it? And I go, it's Local 4 in Boston, in Dorchester, it's a meeting hall. And he goes, it's at your meeting? It's at your union hall? And I go, yeah. He goes, well, that's not open to the public, is it? And I said, well, no, but I got the keys to the place. He says, come on down. Sure. But it didn't matter. They were adamant about, well, that's not a public place. That's not a public building. So we're not going to do it. And
don't want to invite the public if you can't, I guess, have access to it.
Well, yeah, exactly. So they put it as like, that's like your Local 4's museum and your exhibit, not really a public exhibit.
Gotcha.
And they were right. A couple years later, after, in 2018, they had a little discussion down there. I was getting too much stuff in the museum. I had big stuff, and they like to have functions. They like to have Christmas parties and different things where they bring the kids in. And then there was a problem because I had some things open on the shelves and stuff, and I wasn't there with the Christmas party. So it really turned into a thing where like, Steve, you're getting too big. you gotta go find a home. You gotta find a home on your own. So right. Which is kind of where we worked it. And the local helped me start a elevator historical society, which I started. And we got some guys involved, and we got some money together, and we moved out. And we moved to Haverhill, Massachusetts, and we rented like 3 little rooms, and then we got bigger and rented 4 rooms. We kept breaking through the walls and getting bigger and bigger, and but it wasn't. I didn't care for the location that we were in. I had a really nice article that was written about us. They came down to the museum, and a guy came in and wrote a really nice article. But he posted in there, or wrote in there. He says, Steve's got this great museum. It's hidden in the back and in the bottom, and he makes it sound like it was out behind a dumpster somewhere. His description of it. And I said, geez, he cracking you. You talk the place up, and he said, hidden in the walls and back in the corner, in the middle, so it just, but he was describing it correctly. It really was in a very good location.
Gotcha.
And then last year we were really looking. I had so much more stuff. I got a little support from a lot of support from the international and the locals around the country, and they loved the museum. So we got some money up, and we came up to Amesbury. And now I'm in this building right here that I'm in right now, and it's from 1870 as an old mill building. And so it's the exact decor that we were looking for. It's got the wood floors, the wood ceilings, it's got the brick walls, nice. And it's really nice. You got a brewery on the first floor too, which is advantageous to all of us when we
right. Gotta have it.
Yeah, I had a busload of when we first get in here. I had 12 guys come up on a big bus from New York, a bunch of local 35 guys and local 1 guys, and they came up from New York and they parked the bus outside, and they came in and said, "Steve, can we use the brewery downstairs?" I said, "Yeah." I go, "But you gotta go down on the elevator, the first floor, and you go down to the brewery." I said, "You're really not supposed to bring the stuff, but the guys really know what we're doing up here, and they're nice. I know the guys at the brewery." Says, so I had, I think it was 14 of them actually, and I remember standing here talking to two of them in the museum. I turn around, I go, "Well, we go down there." I said, "Just go down a couple at a time, go down there and just, come back up." Well, I'm talking to them. I turn around, and the other 12 guys are gone. And I'm like, "Oh boy, here we go." Next thing you know, they all come walking through the door. There's 12 of them. They all get drinks in their hand, and the owner of the bar is in tow. He's up. Here we go.
He was excited, probably, right? It's like, hey,
he was very happy that he was happy with the busload of guys buying his beers, and he came up and he said, "Stevie," he goes, "Are all these guys with you?" I'm like, "Yes, they are." And I said, "You know, all right with that?" And he said, "Sure." He goes, "I'll come up and get all the beers. I'll get all the glass." I said, "No, you won't, because they come right back down with the baguette." So he was happy about it, and it's been a great place up here.
That's awesome.
We love it.
Yeah, no, I'm just looking behind you. Tell us about this piece that's directly behind you. You were telling me a little bit about it before.
Yeah, the control panel right here.
Well, I see a guy in a blue jacket sitting on some kind of load. To me, it looks like a big old elevator.
Yeah, it is an elevator. There's a couple things. I put a couple things behind me here on purpose. The control panel right to my left. I look in the mirror here. What I'm at is from Mary Baker Eddy's home or castle in Chestnut Hill in Boston. That is in pristine condition. She, like I said, it was installed in 1908. She died in 1910, and it basically never ever operated. And then one day they called me up and said, "Do you want this thing?" And I said, "Absolutely." So we went down and got that. But it's an ABC control panel. It's in literally like brand new. And behind that, the freight elevator that you're looking at with the guy sitting on, that's from the 1890s. Wow. That was a flat belt pulley machine that had these big pulleys that used to run it, and it had hatch doors. The hatch doors open, and the car would go up through the floor. And on the bottom of it, in the front of it, instead of having a tow guide, it had these warning chains. And warning chains are basically in the factory, because a lot of the factories just had like a little bar that would go across the hoistways to keep you from falling down the hatch. And so the little warning chains would, when guys were talking, they'd be sticking their head out in the hoistway. The chains would hit you in the top of the head until you get your head out of the way.
You've been warned.
You've been warned.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. So we get some primitive old stuff in here.
That's awesome. What about that piece of artwork I see on your right and to behind you?
That artwork is Westinghouse, is a Westinghouse escalator painting from Westinghouse Elevators, and that was in their corporate office in New York City. And it's beautiful. I think it's a 6x8 or 6x10 painting. Yeah. Beautiful. It was like a $10,000 painting back in the 80s. So it's a very, very nice painting. Beside it, you'll see some pictures of those are all ink on linen drawings. Wow. And those were given us by George Gibson. He used to work for Otis Elevator, and he was one of the big wheels there. And back in 1978, they used to keep all their archives. Otis used to keep all their archives in Yonkers, New York, where basically where they started.
Sure.
And they had all these old drawings down there. And in 1978, they had all the sprinkler heads go off in the building and shoot water all over the prints and everything in the building, and pretty much just destroyed a lot of stuff, except for the ink on linen drawings, which I actually have some of these right here. Payne Elevator.
Lift that up just a little bit so we can see it in the camera. Okay. That's the ink on linen right there.
It's ink on linen, and it actually feels like plastic. And it's a process which, what they did years ago is everything was written on with carbon and pencils, and the carbon, when you had the paper and you'd flex it back and forth, the carbon would wear off. So after no time at all, you couldn't read what was on the prints. And so when they decided that they had something that they really wanted to keep, and they were going to remanufacture over and over again, they would do this process of having ink on linen, and which was the taking of the print and putting it on top of a linen and tracing it all out in ink as opposed to carbon. But the problem with that is if you made a mistake, it would bleed into the linen and you'd have to start all over again. There was no erasing it. So it was quite the process. George Gibson wrote a little article about it, and we have it here in the museum, but he actually called me up when we had the museum, and he's in Arizona. He said, "Steve," he goes, "I get some of these old elevator prints, and I have a filing case here with tons. I have hundreds and hundreds of old elevator prints and documents, and we have a bookshelf with lots and lots of literature. And I thought he meant like every elevator machine, you walk in the cabinets, you can pull them open. You get 10 pages of all old prints and stuff like that. And I thought that's what he had. He said, Stevie, I got some old prints. You want them? I said, I get tons of prints. And he said, Steve, he goes, this is George Gibson Motors Elevators. He goes, these are ink on linen drawings. These are proprietary, and you want these? And he said, okay, say no more. So he sent them up to me, and I certainly did want them because they're fantastic. They are, they're the originals, and if you look at them, you can tell that they've been worn and handled hundreds and hundreds of times. Years ago, they didn't have printers, they didn't have copy machines, they certainly didn't have anything like that. So they didn't. This was the only way that you could visually see, and you could tell that these drawings were. They were in regular drawing, boards that they would pull out and they'd take them out to the shops. But you could tell that the mechanics and the guys out in the field or the guys in the, in Yonkers would pull them out and play with them because they're all dirty. They're all grease stained, but you can read every number on them. So they're
so
really
it sounds
terrific.
like once they put the ink on the linen, it's going to last forever. I mean, those are some old ones and they're still.
It does. I have, and it's remarkable because some of the things I've learned when I've been here is, I have an Otis Brothers from 1883, and it shows how they machined and made these beautiful steel rails and how well they're made. And I'm looking at them; they look just like rails of today, And that's from 1883, and the dates on it blows my mind because I always thought everything was wooden rails back then. I didn't know that they had steel rails and stuff back then. So, although I've been in the trade a long time, I don't go back to the 1800s.
I was gonna say, yeah, that's a little bit before your day for sure. That's awesome. That's wonderful. So, I'm just curious, what are some of the challenges of keeping the museum up and running? I don't know if you charge people when they come, or if it's free to come, but then you need support from others, or how does that work?
Well, we've always had people, since we've opened. It's been like most museums. It's not a lot of traffic. I have functions here, which really, we had a grand opening. We brought a bunch of guys from Local 4 up. I had a retirement party, so we had all the retirees come here. The town of Amesbury has a big, huge car show where they take over the center of town. They have all the cars in town, so I had a party that day, and then I had a Christmas party. So I have functions that I try to bring people in here, but on the weekends, like now, even though we have a beautiful building, there's a brewery in the first floor, there's a bunch of people down there. We have people that walk in, and we're getting a little more because we just moved in February of this year.
Okay.
So we just got back into this building, and I spent all summer. I was working full time at the Navy Yard. I was working, my wife says she's married to a museum. She's a museum widow, she calls herself, because I'd come home from work, I'd grab my dog, and I'd run down the museum here, and I'd be down here 10, 11 o'clock at night, and I'd get up in the morning, go off to work all day, and I'd come here, and I was here on weekends and nights, and I didn't miss many days here in 22 ever coming to the museum. So I spent thousands of hours in my time here trying to set the place up, because even though we moved, it cost a lot to move, but the movers came in with boxes and they just threw it all on the floor and walked away. They had a lot of help getting it here, but nobody really helped me set everything up. You know what I mean? So that was a lot of work trying to get the place set up and going. And we have people come here on the weekends. We charge them $10 a person, $5 for seniors, and nothing for kids under 12. And so we make $20-$30 and on a day here and there, and but it's certainly not the $3,100 a month that we try to. We pay a lease here. We have 2,500 square feet, and it's a beautiful building and beautiful spot. But the museum itself is doing great. The finances for it is a little. We're chasing the money all the time. So
where do you get most of that support from? What
the international has been really good. The locals across the country, I have some, Local 4 has been a lot of help to us. Local 2 in Chicago has helped us out. The Local 18 out in Las Vegas, Local 8 out in San Francisco, 71 down in Miami, and I hate leaving anybody out, but we probably have about 15 guys that the 15 locals that have helped us out. But there's a couple hundred locals out there, and all the guys have been here. A bunch of the guys have been here at different times, and now that we really got a much nicer location, and I feel this really is. If you saw us in Haverhill, we didn't have anywhere near this nice of a building and setup. So I always thought it was very, important to have that. And even when I was growing, some of the guys like Steve, don't get any more space. We're not gonna be able to afford it. And I says, you don't understand. The way I look at it differently. I need the place to look really nice.
Sure.
And I always compare it to Ripley's Believe It or Not. And the reason why I used to take my boys all the time to Ripley's Believe It or Not. They have the museum, so we go on vacation. We go down to Florida. You go to Ripley's Believe It or Not, and you walk in there, and I was like, wow, this place is cool. And you'd walk around, and you're in there for 15, 20 minutes. You walk around this really big place. Then you see all these really weird things, and it was good. You walk out the door, and then I went to Ripley, believe it or not, up by Niagara Falls one time. My boys, it's one right over the border there, and you pay $15, you walk in the door, and you literally walk in and right around a circle and right back out the door. And I said, "What a ripoff!" You know what I mean? Like, what do you mean? I go, well, and that's why I compared this to. I says, I don't want to bring people here from New York or from Pennsylvania. From people come up here and be like, "Oh, I want to see the Elevator Museum." They walk in there, and there's like just so few things that
Right.
they're in and out in a couple minutes. Like, that was okay, but there's not enough there. I always wanted to have plenty of stuff here. Like, I got a water hydro from 1890s. I got some hand operated elevators from mansions, little hand operated, elevators. And I got the whole setup. I got hand operated dumbwaiters. I get a lot of old stuff, So that was important to me to get a really good base so that it was worth coming to, and when we were smaller, it wasn't, in my opinion, it wouldn't be worth it. You know what I mean? Like, you wouldn't be having a podcast with me today if I didn't have much more to do. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
even though the money's stretched out a little thinner because I have a bigger location, overall it's been a lot better to have it this way, I feel.
Great. Yeah.
So,
Do you feel like you have all the equipment you need, or are you still, receiving donations from people around the country?
I get stuff every single week. Matter of fact, I have a lady, Kaja Wilkinson. She works for Elevator World.
Cool.
She sent me last week, and I didn't even know, because it's funny. I ordered some like a calendar, which I knew was going to come in a round tube. And so I was here last, 2 weekends ago, and I took the tube and I saw it at the front door, and I opened it. I put it over by my desk, and I said, "That's a tube for that thing I got up on the wall." And then I left it there. I never even opened it. The following week, I came in here and I saw the tube, and I looked at it. I'm like, wow, that's an awful big tube for that. And I'm looking at it again. I'm like, this is from Elevator World. I didn't know what if anything from Elevator World. And there was a girl's name on it. I opened the package up, and there was 2 paintings that were from, and she gave me the paperwork on it too. And it's from William Sturgeon's home. And he's the founder of Elevator World.
Okay.
And when he passed away in 2012, some of the employees of Elevator World were allowed over his home and allowed to take, and they were given some of the pictures and some of the paintings. And these are beautiful, beautiful canvas paintings of escalators. And I just open up the tube and I pull them out, and I'm like, wow, this is great.
Awesome.
And it's not just nice paintings, but where they come from. You know what I mean?
Oh,
to have
absolutely.
it from William Sturgeon's home. And we're going to have them all framed up real nice, and I'll put them up on the wall with the tag and stating where they come from. And those things, I think, mean a lot to me too, because you can get a lot of equipment that can be, the same type of stuff, but if it comes from a really neat place, like I have 5 or 6 Otis flyball governors in here, but like a friend of ours that was working for Otis, he did the Mount Washington Hotel.
Oh, wow.
And they did the mod up there, and the Mount Washington Hotel is a beautiful, beautiful hotel. And they took the Otis flyball governor. I'm like, I want that. You got to give me that thing. So I do the guy, he's a big guy. He see me, I'll give it to you. I'm like, I want that. I go, just say it came from Mount Washington. That's fantastic, So
awesome.
we get things from different places like that. I got, elevator certificates from 1954 from the White House.
Cool. Yeah.
Original certificates from the White House and stuff like that. So
it's
a
amazing.
lot of original things.
Yeah. No, sorry. I was just saying it's amazing to look at, how you've seen. In other words, as you look at the equipment you have, you can see how the nation, the United States in particular, has grown with the elevator industry. Like you say, you've seen from Mount Washington, from the Washington D.C. and it's really the nation that we know, and the high rises have kind of grown with elevators, or maybe elevators have allowed us to have some of the buildings, the institutions, some of the things we have today that we Probably wouldn't have
Without a
happened.
doubt, the elevator industry, people don't even realize that, back in the Industrial Revolution, without the elevator industry, the company wouldn't have grown like it, the world, the country wouldn't have grown like it had.
Sure.
The elevators actually brought all the material up into these buildings, when they started getting 3 and 4 and 5 stories high, they all started off as freight elevators. People don't realize that either. Very early 1800s, when they had all these steam powered, they used to call the steam powered, they would call them engines. They didn't call them machines back then.
Sure.
They literally took the train engines off of the trains and turned them vertically and put a drum on instead of a wheel and spin it one way or the other, and there you go. You're off to the races. So,
Wow. that's
yeah,
that's
so
incredible. So you're talking about it's like a boiler essentially is what you got going on to power it with.
exactly right. You have a boiler with a steam powered and a big flywheel, and it turned it just like a locomotive on a train. And it spun. You could spin it the other way, back and forth, and put a drum on it, and there you go.
Way you go.
We also have in here, which some things you'll never find anywhere else in the world. Is Larry Hart. He's an ex-veteran. He's an ex-IUC member. He lives out in the state of Oregon, and the guy's incredible. But he's made up a bunch of elevator machines and birdcage elevator. And right now, it's en route to me right now, is you've probably seen it posted in LinkedIn, is the gearless machine. Did you see that?
I didn't see
If
that
you,
yet. No.
if you look at my my LinkedIn website there, you'll see that, and I'll get better pictures of it because it's en route here now. But he's mailing me a Otis gearless machine that's this big. You know what I mean? You can hold it in your hands, and it's precise. It's exactly spot on. He made us a horizontal hydraulic, the piston, the rope like 3-to-1, the old style, real old style. He made one of those that I have here in the museum that runs. It actually operates.
Wow.
It doesn't operate off of water. He's got it like hidden in with a little gear screw in there. So when you ship it, there's a little shipper rope with a freight elevator, and you ship it over, and the piston pushes the shivs out, and the car travels up, it travels up and hits a little ball stop and ships itself off, travels back down, ships itself off, and shuts off. So he's made us up multiple things here at the museum, which are incredible. He's just a really good craftsman, but those are just like the little models that he's made for us, at the museum.
That's great. That's
We got
great.
some strange things like that.
Yeah. So as you look at the future of what you created, what do you foresee for the museum going forward?
Well, I'm 62. I retired in November of last year, and what I want to do is I want to try to run the museum, but I have a 5-year lease here, and one year is gone. I have 4 more left. What I'd like to do is partner up with someone, whether it's the International, whether it's Elevator World, whether it's Otis, and so that this thing goes on. This isn't this museum isn't about me. It's about
Sure.
our heritage and our history. And I feel like I've just been fortunate enough to have a bunch of people that supported me, and then it just blew up when we really started getting things in. I got stuff from all over the country. I have plaques in here from Norway that people
Wow.
sent me from Norway.
Okay.
I have a really kind of weird thing. I have Martin Kane is a friend of mine. He works for Otis. He's in the UK, and he went over and he worked on the Queen's Castle, and he worked on. She has in her castle. She has a dollhouse. The dollhouse is about, I don't know, it's 10 feet tall, 8 feet wide. It's like an 8-foot square, and it comes up out of the ground. It comes up out, and the sides come down. It has operating miniature cars in it. It has elevators in it. Well,
Wow.
the whole walls lift up in the air so you can see into the dollhouse. And this is not a dollhouse for the average person. This was in her castle. So this was in the Queen's castle, and he rewrote it. He went there and had all guards and everything walking around him, and he rewrote it, and he gave me the cables from the dollhouse. So and he sent me stuff from over there, and I have some stuff from Hawaii. The president of the IUC in Hawaii came out and visited us, and he brought me stuff. And so people, I had a guy from Pennsylvania call me up and said, "Steve, do you have any of the old hot and oil cans?" I said, "I got some." He goes, "I'm retired, but I'm going to go buy my building that I used to take care of, and I'm going to be up there and see you." I'm like, "All right." So sure enough, he retired 2 years ago, and he came up and he went to one of the buildings in Pennsylvania and went up in the room, up in the machine room, and there were a couple of Horton cans, and he picked them up and he brought them to me and visited the museum, gave me the cans, and I threw them up on the shelf, and they're still full of oil. So I get stuff from, like I said, all over the country. Paul Paul Moore actually had he worked for Payne Elevator, and he worked there, and he had took the cranes when Payne Elevator went out of business, and he worked there for 25 years. When Payne Elevator went out of business in 1995, he took the big plaque off the crane, the big granny crane that used to run across the thing there for 100 years. And
Wow.
Payne Elevator is a great company. They manufactured terrific elevators. As a matter of fact, they did most of the elevators all across all the football stadiums across the country. So
Wow.
he had all kinds of stuff, and he did the same thing. He brought it home. He had his house for 20 years, didn't know what to do with it. And he's like, Steve, you want some of the stuff? I'm like, oh, I want all of it. Give me it. So he came down, and Paul Loan, I got his name wrong. Paul Loan's just a really good guy. He brought me hats and hard hats and, tons of stuff. So, since the museum's opened up, I have a collection of everybody's collection now. So people
Right.
that collect the things that, said, Steve, can I bring it there? And I go, yeah. So that's why I need to keep the place going, because I have a lot of people who are counting on me to keep this place up and going. I made friends with a guy in Italy through LinkedIn. He's talking to me about, I have a film projector here with film that shows elevator roping from the 1930s on how to rope an elevator. Wow. Yeah, I haven't watched it yet because I want to send the film out to somebody professionally to have it really, so I don't burn or wreck the film.
Right.
But I post that online there because it's a J.A. Roebling, and he's the gentleman who started he didn't make the elevator cables, but the late 1800s or so, like 1868, I think was when they first really came out with the patent cables and stuff.
Okay.
And I posted online that it was 1930, and he private messaged me, messaged me on the side. He said, Steve, he goes, I know John A. Roebling, and I did a lot of study on him with the cables, and I love what you're doing out there. He goes, but I think you get the dates wrong, and and he goes, it wasn't 1830. I go, I didn't write 1830. I wrote 1930. He's like, oh yeah, you did. So he was real nice about it. He was thinking. I said, it's about the film and the process. I go, it wasn't about J. Roebling. It was about actually the projector and film stuff. But I just, like I said, I get friends all over the world now that that chirp in once in a while and send me stuff and talk about the museum. So they love it. It's a good thing.
It sounds like you're building something amazing there. That as you get people knowing about you, they want to come visit. They want to send you money. They want to send you equipment or memorials, because there's a lot of people that have that deep passion like you do for the industry, that love it, want to see it live on. And so
you certainly do.
Yeah.
Patrick Carr actually gave me everything that he has, and he spent over $100,000 buying things. I have the original books from the Otis brothers that I know he paid a fortune for. He wouldn't even tell me what you bought it for, but from 1873.
Wow.
And it's a book that has every one of their orders, and it came from Yonkers, New York, and the brothers in there. And if you should see all the inkwell writing in it, every page is an order. So you turn the page and you see this beautiful, writings, with inkwell, and they really, it's an incredible book just to look at, and the history that, that came from this, So we have things in here that just one of a kind offs that, are they're priceless. Some of the things are priceless. There's only one in the world, and we have it here.
That's awesome. So a couple questions as we're kind of getting toward the end of our time. So I'm, need to wrap up here in a minute, but I'm just curious, what do you think it is that makes people so passionate about the elevator industry? Seems to just get in their blood.
Well, I think the simple reason that people I love that saying that Westinghouse has over there, taken for granted up through the years. People, you get the pictures behind you right there. That's proof. You walk up, you get into a box, and up you get, and you get off of it, and you get off at the box to the next floor. It doesn't show you the hoistway. It doesn't show you the machine room. It doesn't show you the top of the car. It doesn't show you the bottom of the car. It doesn't show you the limit switches. It doesn't show you all the electronics going on or the old mechanical stuff. So people have no clue when they get on that elevator what's in it. And so I think when people see the things that we have and we show them here, I brought a lot of the people that come to the museum here are all elevator people, a lot of them. But there are
Sure.
lots of people, just, people that want to learn the history. And I had a girl in here the other day with her husband. She loved it. She says, "I don't know what you do." She goes, "I'm glad you're here because you really tell a story to all of it and put it into a story," and which I like to do. The same thing the behavioral economist guy said that too. That um, I really like to teach people about what's going on in it. You know what I mean? So I just think that people don't know enough about it. When they hear and they see the stuff here, they're just fascinated. So
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
makes you want to go on more.
So, Steve, I know your motto is preserving the past and elevating the future. And what I want to know is, what is your vision? What are you most hoping to accomplish through this work you're doing?
Well, basically, Matt, preserving our past and elevating our future. What we basically mean by that is, I thought that if we could preserve some of the artifacts from our past that is being destroyed literally every day and taken off the dumps and thrown out, that we could preserve it. And by preserving it, we could educate the guys who come behind us so that they'd understand how far we've come. And so they'd have a little understanding of what the type of equipment they're working on and what the things that we used to take care of. And my vision is to have this museum go on. I mean, I got this collection that I started. My help from my father, from Patrick Carr, from guys, hundreds of guys all across the country. And I literally have guys from Norway and from England who help support us, have given us things here to the museum. And my goal is to make this last a lot longer than I do, and to have this go on so that, like I said, to elevate our future literally means, I feel, is to show that these kids that, follow behind us will have some sort of material things that they can actually touch and to see and to put in their hands. Because until you actually see the equipment that I've saved and the car stations and haul stations and water hydros and hand operated elevators and everything else that we have, until you actually see those in person, you don't realize that they ever existed, and it's a shame because I feel like our industry is one of the profound industries in the world that actually helped, not only build America, but build the rest of the world. And without the elevators and without we had, I mean, we wouldn't be where we are today. And so I'm a little biased because I was, brought up in it my whole life. And so I always felt it was one of the best trades in the world. And now, when I look back in retrospect and I see the equipment that we're putting in nowadays and things, and, some of the kids out there, the new kids, I go to the Union Hall in Boston and they come to the museum here once in a while and they're blown away by the equipment that we have here. So I love it. I think we're educating people. And when I have people who, when they do leave here, I want to have a real understanding that how the elevators, helped the country build and became what it was today. And a lot of people don't realize that. A lot of people don't, you get on an elevator, it's a closed wall, and you push a button and off you go. And like I said, people don't understand that, what they don't know. And so, like I said, I worked here my whole life. My dad collecting parts and throwing them all in the trash. And I feel like, it's crazy because we are one of the few places that do preserve this, and nobody does. Nobody saves any of this equipment. So it's sad.
No, it's beautiful. I love that vision. I love what you're trying to accomplish. So, last thing I want to ask you, I noticed in a lot of your material that your dog is in that. In there. Can you introduce him to us?
Boomer, come here. Come here, say hi, Daddy. This is Boomer, my mascot. Boom,
Beautiful.
Who's here? Who's here? Who's here, Boom? Anybody? There's somebody here. Boom, come here. Boomer, come here. Come here. Come here, say hi. Who's out there?
He's not sure what to think.
Boom.
So, is he as passionate about elevators as
We're gonna
you
give a
are?
tour today. Excuse me?
I said, is he as passionate about elevators as you are?
He's passionate about the visitors. He loves when we have visitors here. He loves them. He comes in. He walks around with us all over the place, and his he's my buddy. He comes here every day with me. And last year I spent almost every single day here, setting the museum up when we first moved in, and he came with me every single day. So he's my partner in crime.
Awesome. Well, Steve, thank you. Appreciate your time. It's good talking with you, and I wish you the best as you continue to build your museum.
Thank you very much, Matt. Appreciate your help.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Elevator Careers Podcast, sponsored by the Allred Group, a leader in elevator industry recruiting. You can check us out online at elevatorcareers.net. Please subscribe, and until next time, stay safe.